Just when you think you've seen it all, you've seen nothing. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for May 11th, 2025. And first order of business before we get into the hockey, happy Mother's Day to all those moms out there. My mom, Doris, who is in central New Jersey, the lovely town of West Windsor. And just a good day for all the moms.
For sure. A lot of wonderful mothers out there. I had one myself. I should say I still have her. She's up looking down, listening to the podcast. She would have been our biggest podcast listener if she were here. But now she can listen. You know, she knows everything we're saying before we say it even.
And I hope she's correcting us if we make any mistakes, too.
You got to know that, you think. That would take about 3 seconds flat.
Hey, when we were speaking on Saturday, and I think this was actually even an off-camera thing, maybe it was an on-camera thing also, we had discussed how many goals were coming off of crazy bounces and deflections and pucks off of rear ends and stuff like that. And before we get into the detail of the Vegas-Edmonton game, boy, the end of that one had all that and a bag of chips.
Yeah, it sure did. I mean, that was crazy ending to that game in Edmonton. And, well, I'll let you get to it.
All right. Well, we're going to get started then, because the Oilers had won the first two games of the series and were looking to get themselves within one win of a return to the conference final. Stuart Skinner started, and we had just touched on this lightly, that it appeared that in the last game, Calvin Pickard might have been a little bit shaken up when Thomas Hertl fell over him. And indeed, he was kept out of the game, wasn't even the backup on Saturday. So he is listed as day-to-day. And for the Golden Knights, Braden McNabb was in the lineup, and Pavel Dorofeyev also returned, his first game since the fifth game of the Minnesota series. So I thought the Golden Knights actually had a decent start in the first 3 to 5 minutes of the game, and Skinner looked pretty good.
No, he did. Skinner looked real good in this. In the early part of the game, it looked like there wasn't going to be any issue with Skinner after missing. You know, he hasn't played for quite a while, but he didn't show that early in the game.
No, his last game prior to Saturday was Game 2 in the series against Los Angeles, and Pickard had played and completed 6 straight since then. And the Oilers got on the board first, 7-19. Draisaitl to Connor McDavid, and then a Corey Perry. And what a savvy goal he scored there. Had a slight hesitation in the high slot, kind of froze Adin Hill. He's going to be 40 on Friday.
Yeah, but he still knows how to do what he's always done. He's always been a good goal scorer, Corey Perry. I mean, always. We all remember him back in Anaheim and how great he was as a younger player back there. But yesterday, you're right. He came in, froze Hill, nice wrist shot, 1-0.
They almost made it 2-0 after Evander Kane came out of the penalty box. He and McDavid teamed up to get a puck to Leon Draisaitl, who hit the crossbar. But then on the Oilers' first power play of the game, they get their first power play goal of the series after Zach Whitecloud took an interference penalty on McDavid. It's Perry again, tipping an Evan Bouchard shot.
Yeah, and of course, Perry's always right in front of the goalie, you know, driving everybody nuts. And you got to have a lot of courage, too, to tip a Bouchard shot, because Bouchard can shoot it over 100 miles an hour. So that was great. The Edmonton's up 2-0, and both goals have been put in by Corey Perry.
Just thriving on that top line. And I had texted you right after that goal, and I said, I think this series is one Edmonton goal away from being over.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah, and I was like wondering sort of what you meant at that complete moment, but I did get it later.
Not so fast, because on a rebound of a Nick Hague shot, Nick Waugh managed to get one in past Skinner, and I didn't think Skinner looked real good on this one. Kind of wasn't centered, kind of tried to cradle the puck in the crook of his arm, and Waugh is there for the rebound, and then just 54 seconds later, Riley Smith catches 3 Oilers flat-footed at the blue line. He comes in with speed, beats Skinner, and in a game we thought was getting away from Vegas really quickly, is now 2-2 heading into the intermission.
Within a minute. Within a minute. Yeah, just shows you about hockey. Things can change in a skinny minute, and they sure did here. And as you said, they go into the locker room now. It's a completely different game.
So, in as much as we had mentioned McNabb and Dorofeyev coming back for the Golden Knights, they lose their captain, Mark Stone, late in the first period, upper body injury. So they're going to have to now move forward for the rest of this game without their leader.
Yeah, although they didn't know that at the time, right? Like nobody knew whether he was going to come back or not. Everybody, at least the TV guys, kept watching the bench to see if Stone was back, but he wasn't.
As this game went on, Edmonton appeared to lose a lot of its juice, a lot of its energy, and I thought Vegas did a terrific job being aggressive in all 3 zones. And when they're on their game, they are attacking like a pack of rabid dogs in the neutral, defensive, and attacking zones. And I thought that they did that for right at the end of the first period, throughout the second period, and a good portion of the third. And they actually went ahead on a give and go between William Karlsson and Noah Hannafin. And that put them ahead with 2:55 left in the second. It was a poor line change by the Oilers to boot.
Yeah, and the Oilers had been on the ice for a long time. That group had been on for quite a while, and they were trying to get a change, and it was a bad line change. Karlsson ends up with the go-ahead goal, and as you said, they were on Edmonton from the time the period started, the second period, till the time it ended.
Considering the frenzy that the building was in at the start of the game, Rogers was pretty dead throughout the better part of the first half of the third period. Oilers were really generating nothing, and continued great work by Vegas to protect that 1-goal lead.
It's funny how that building can go, right? Like everybody's crazy. It's almost like Toronto, the same thing. But when the team falls behind, everybody's scared. They're nervous. They sit on their hands. They say nothing. It's not like an American building where people are screaming no matter what. The Canadian buildings seem to get quiet if their team gets behind.
Stuart Skinner made a game saver off Waugh with a little over 8 minutes left, and then Draisaitl with a near miss from that lower right circle with 7 minutes left, and then Aiden Hill with a great glove save on McDavid at 3:20. So you could see that the Oilers are starting to push late in this game, and finally McDavid, a few seconds after that Hill save, a centering feed goes off McNabb's skate, of all people, to tie the game with 3:02 left.
And there we go. And just like we said yesterday, these crazy goals that go in the playoffs where, fabulous saves, fabulous shots, fabulous speed. The goal, it went in off the defenseman's skate.
What do they used to say in those infomercials? But wait, there's more. Because in the dying seconds of regulation, William Karlsson chases a puck behind the Edmonton net, and 3 Oilers go towards him. He gets the puck into the slot to Riley Smith, who fakes his shot. And I think a lot of the commentary last night was, well, what great instincts to do that. Well, he had 2 Oilers basically right on his blade. And as opposed to shooting, held on to the puck, went wide on Skinner, sent the puck through the crease. It wasn't going to be a shot on goal, but Leon Draisaitl inadvertently bats it into his own net with 0.4 seconds to go in regulation. The Golden Knights are back in this series. But if you're Edmonton, how does this happen?
I don't know, but my question is this the same Riley Smith that played on the Rangers all year?
He's got championship pedigree with Vegas, not so much in New York, but boy,
No, I mean,
does he look like he's been reborn, right?
Oh my gosh, he goes back to Vegas, and it's the same guy that we saw during the Cup run and everything. There he is. Yeah, you mean he was gone for a while? Where was he gone? Because I sure didn't see him in the Rangers uniform. Tremendous game for him last night to be in those situations, to be able to get that winning goal. As much as it was such a fluke, he was there to do it. And of course he got that earlier goal. So what a game for Riley Smith, and what a way to win a game.
I think the upshot here also is that the Oilers took their foot off the gas, and that's also a combination with Vegas being aggressive all over the ice, and the Oilers really didn't get back into gear again until the back end of the third period. You have seen enough playoff series in your lifetime, and Vegas has had more than enough quality minutes throughout the three games. So it's very rare when you see the play this even that a series ever goes to 3-0.
Right, exactly, because the teams are too even, and one team pushes as hard as it possibly can. Yeah, you don't see sweeps of teams that are real even. And you know what? When you see a series like this, or where their teams are close, even though it does go to 3-0, there's still hope of a comeback. Usually doesn't happen, but there is hope for a comeback. I remember when I was general manager of Adirondack Red Wings, 1986, we went down 3-0 on the Hershey Bears, but I felt that we were still in it. Like we could have won all three of the games. We came back 4 straight to win the Calder Cup.
Vegas won't have to do that. They only now need to try to get home ice back, and they will have that opportunity in Game 4 in Edmonton Monday at 9:30. On the Eastern side, Carolina takes a 2-1 series lead with a 4-0 win over Washington. In this game, I thought the Caps got out far better in the first period than we saw in games 1 and 2 at home. And we'd even mentioned taking a page out of the Toronto book, where they weren't going to take the body blow from Florida. They were going to try to push the game a little bit. And I thought they did that in the first period.
They did, and that's where you got to give Freddie Anderson a lot of credit. I mean, we on this program have doubted whether or not Freddie Anderson can take Carolina anywhere in the playoffs. That seems to be their Achilles heel, is their goaltending. We had someone on here who covers the Devils in the first round saying that he thought that the Devils, even without Jack Hughes, might be able to beat Carolina based on Markstrom versus the goaltending that Carolina has. And now you've got to turn around and say Freddie Anderson, he held the fort for Carolina in that first period. And you're right. They came out and put the big push on Carolina, but they couldn't score.
He made some good stops on Tom Wilson, Taylor Radish, a couple on Alex Ovechkin, and as we said, clearly this was the best opening period in the series. I mean, it's a pretty low bar that Washington actually set for themselves, but they did have a 9-6 edge in shots and 22-19 in attempts. And I think, for certain, what we had seen in the first two games is Carolina getting 35, 37 attempts in the first period. And of course, that gets halved in this opening stanza.
Yeah, which is really shocking because this is the first game back in Carolina, and usually that's what Carolina does to the opponent when you get into their building. They really take it to you early.
I thought Washington was in a real good spot midway through this game, and even head coach Rod Brindamore had said during one of the TV breaks he was not happy with his club's play, but then one of these small things that manages to flip a game, Jordan Martinook knocking Tom Wilson on his keister, and then a face-off to the left of Logan Thompson. And Andrei Svechnikov steps into the dot. He beats John Carlson there, and he opens the scoring with 7:26 left in the period.
Yeah, for a veteran like Carlson, who's lined up beside Svechnikov, who they know is a great scorer, a great offensive threat. He jumps through the circle, and Carlson is left in his shadow and far behind him. And so for a veteran like him to let that happen, that was bad. And that started the scoring with Svechnikov.
Thompson made a couple of big stops later on Hall and Svechnikov, the aforementioned, but then Carolina power play. Late in the period, Jack Roslovic, who's in for Mark Jankowski, scores from the short side of the left wing circle. I didn't think this was a real good goal that Thompson gave up there.
No, it wasn't. I think when Roslovic scored that, even he was surprised. But it was a big blow to the Caps at that point.
And that continued in the third period because at 3:14, Eric Robinson on the left side scores far side on Thompson, who was really deep in his net, wasn't squared up to Robinson. And this was another goal that was a little bit on the soft side.
It was, but I think the explanation of why he was back so far in his net was because he expected the pass on the far side of the crease at that point, left alone, and Thompson was probably watching him. The guy that I blame for this is Carlson, because John Carlson gets walked by Robinson, just spun right around him and was able to hit that corner again, as you and I are trying to describe. Thompson's way back. I mean, his butt is inside the net when this shot gets taken. But I think he's playing the pass across the crease because he knows he doesn't have anybody there from his team. So, yeah, Robinson catches the corner, and now the Caps are in huge trouble.
The second half of the game, I thought, was nearly perfect for Carolina, much like the entire first game of the series and the start of game 2. The shots ended 28-21 for Carolina, but 76-49. So, realistically, after that TV timeout in the second period, this was all Hurricanes, and the Caps were nowhere to be found.
No, they weren't. And the energy that Brindamore talked about in that TV interview on the bench came out in the Hurricanes. But, Vic, I think this is a matter of them getting energy, getting oxygen because they got the lead. And that was what was propelling them. They were playing a little bit nervous until they got that lead. And once they got the lead, I thought that they changed. The whole team changed. Watch Svechnikov scored, stepping into the dot, like you said, and beating him. I thought that their team changed. And you combine that with excellent goaltending at the other end from Freddie Anderson, who gets his first shutout ever, playoff shutout.
First with the Hurricanes, fourth in his career.
Oh, first with the Hurricanes. But an excellent game for him. And, again, I don't want to stay on this too long, but, we doubted whether Anderson, how would he be after, another injury? How long is this guy he gets hurt all the time. Is he going to stay out very long? Well, he came back, and he's come back even better than he was.
Also credit the Hurricanes and the way that they're playing in front of him, because he did not have to make a lot of big saves yesterday. Wasn't really tested, even though he made some good stops early in the first period. Once the Hurricanes got going, it was like there was a shield around him. So, again, not to diminish what Anderson is doing, but I think this is really a collective effort on the Hurricanes' part.
We should mention, too, because we mentioned talking about the 40-year-old Corey Perry scoring, almost 40 years old, scoring that gifted goal in the Edmonton-Vegas game. What about the hit Burns put on Ovechkin? I mean, he blasted Ovechkin down there in the corner, and not many people do that to OV. And that was a solid, clean hit.
And not the first one that they've had in this series either. The two elder statesmen.
And I thought to myself when I saw that, I thought, I guess Brent, and I know Burns, but Brent must have played against Ovechkin his whole career. Yeah. Ovechkin's whole career and Burns' whole career. So Burns started out in Minnesota, played for the Wild, got traded over to San Jose, played in San Jose for quite a while, got traded over to the Carolina Hurricanes, while Ovechkin stayed the whole time in Washington. But it would be the one guy out there that wouldn't think twice about hitting Ovechkin is probably the guy that's played against him his entire career, and he's the same age as him. You know, you're probably not going to get Jackson Blake trying to run Ovechkin, young kid, but probably Burns, he has a different level of respect for him being the same age and having played against each other in their whole career.
Pretty basic with Burns also. At his age, 40, turned 40 March 9th, he's played over 900 consecutive games. I don't know the exact number, but it's over 900.
No, he's the Iron Man right now in the NHL. And I think he's been growing that beard the whole 900 games.
him and Joe Thornton, and I think maybe he might even pass Phil Kessel for the all-time consecutive games mark. So just a remarkable career. Before we leave this game, Blake did score the final goal of the game to make it 4-0. Let's flip this here over to the Washington side because they've had some good minutes in this series. Clearly not as many as Carolina. They've lost home ice advantage. They have a chance to get it back when this series resumes Monday in Carolina at 7 o'clock. I'm not in love with their game, though, in this series.
No, I'm not either. I was really not in love with the way they played yesterday. So they're going to have to sharpen up or they're going to lose game 4. If they play the way they played yesterday, I don't think they can beat Carolina.
I think the same thing as we saw with the Maple Leafs, and Toronto did a better job of it in Game 3 in Florida than the Caps did in this third game. And this will be their ability as to whether or not they can open the game the same way and sustain pressure through 60 minutes. And basically, they were able to do it for about 30. And that's not going to be enough.
And the other thing I'd like you to comment on, because from my eyes, I'm waiting for that vaunted Washington power play to come to life. I don't think they had, first of all, many power plays yesterday. I don't have the number in front of me. Do you have that stat?
Both teams had 2. Carolina converted on both, and Washington was 0 for 2. But you got to remember also that the Hurricanes were number 1 in the NHL during the course of the regular season and have only given up 1 power play goal during the course of these playoffs, and that was to Washington in game number 2 of this series. So, yes, the Washington power play is struggling, but you got to give credit to Carolina.
I wouldn't as much say that they're struggling, but they're not getting the chances to get out there and get going. I'll never forget being in a UBS arena that day, and as soon as the Islanders took a penalty, the whole building erupted that, we're going to see it. And sure enough, within less than a minute, Ovechkin had scored on the power play. And so you're sort of sitting around waiting to see, okay, when are we going to see that big one-timer? Carolina does such a great job on special teams. You know, you just don't see it.
I always love watching the higher seed in, this isn't a must-win situation because until you've lost 3 games, it's not must-win, but in a spot that they don't want to go down 3-1. And they're going to have to bring something to this 4th game, and I look forward to that.
Yeah, no, they're going to have to. Well, look, I think what you see in playoffs a lot of times is a correction. So Carolina has nothing to correct. They won 4-0. They'll go out. They'll practice hard. I'm sure Rod Brind'Amour will have some things he wants them to work on. But Washington will be the ones that study the video and then come back with some corrections. And you'll see a better Washington team in game 4. You will see that. That's the way the playoffs always go. One team wins, the other team corrects. That team wins, the other team corrects, and that's what makes playoffs so great.
All about adjustments.
That's for sure.
Let's check in on the Sunday slate. 2 games, both on TBS, and an early start, 4:30 Eastern, Winnipeg and Dallas. That series will now catch up to the other 3 series, at least briefly. Series is tied 1 apiece. News here, no Miro Heiskanen again for Dallas, and wasn't surprised that he did not play in Game 2, given that the Stars had won Game 1. But now that he's not playing in Game 3, with the series returning to Dallas, you surprised that he's not in?
Oh, yeah, because all indications were that he was real close. He was skating. He was, going to be in at any moment. And he's still not in, which tells me that the injury is just lingering. And either doesn't think he's good enough to play or the doctor doesn't think he's good enough to play.
What are you expecting from Dallas in this game in particular? Because the effort on Friday was clearly lackluster. They were playing catch-up from the first minute of the game. Their forward group was really nowhere to be found in this one. And you have to think that they're going to start with a big push here.
You got to think that they're in Dallas. They're at home. They've got to entertain their fans, but get the fans behind them, get the building rocking, and make Winnipeg feel like they're a million miles from home and that this is our barn and we're taking over this game. They have to do that early and, try to get the Hellebuck since he's Winnipeg's secret sauce.
So now, since he's riding a scoreless streak of 83-22, including the shutout in Game 2, if we're expecting the big push from Dallas, and Hellebuck is truly back on his game, we mentioned it on Saturday, that he was pulled 3 times in the St. Louis series. So before we're convinced that he is all the way back, I think he needs a strong performance in Game 3.
Yes, because he needs to perform on the road. Those 3 times he was pulled were all in St. Louis. So, he's got to come back now. Now he's shown that he can be himself in Winnipeg. Now they need this on the road.
The later game, quote unquote, it's 7:30 Eastern, so we'll be wrapping up relatively early unless that game goes to 3 or 4 overtimes. Toronto and Florida will play their 4th game. The news for Toronto is goaltender Anthony Stolarz is progressing, but still not skating. So I think, needless to say, is probably still feeling the effects of what we believe to be is a concussion.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like he's coming back anytime soon, so it'll be Joseph Woll. But here's my question for you about this series. When is number 34, the $13 million man, going to show up? I mean, he's got 2 goals so far in the playoffs. He's doing all the right things defensively and all that stuff, but that's not what he's paid for. He's paid to get goals.
But they've also gotten offense from a lot of other places. So if his game is solid in the 200-foot realm, meaning playing good defensive hockey, he's getting his points, he's getting some assists. Like you said, he's only got 2 goals, but in terms of playoff hockey, now that they've gotten additional offensive support, does he need to be in on every single goal? So I guess I'm answering your question with a question.
Well, he doesn't have to be in on every single goal, but he's got to get more than 2 goals in 8 games. I mean, that's what he's paid for. That's who he is. And he's done the same thing in last year's playoffs, too. This is his history. If you look at his history, he really tails off in the playoffs compared to the regular season.
This is a big game for Toronto because certainly they could have gone up 3-0 in the series. They had a soft spot in the second period where they gave up the 3 goals, came back to tie it, had some chances in overtime and didn't get it. Florida's got the pedigree of a champion. There's also a nemesis in Brad Marchand that seems to turn up every spring in Toronto, regardless of the uniform that he's wearing, and does some damage here. And I want to see how Toronto brings it, because I think they've proven they can play with this team. But they certainly don't want to go back 2-2. They want to go home with a chance to put this series away. And I want to see if they can open and sustain an entire 60 minutes and not have a lapse on Sunday.
That's what, of course, the coaches will want, but that's also what Florida's going to want. And that's why they're playing the game, because we don't know which way it's going to go. Toronto has proven that you can't out-muscle them. You can't out-anything them. I mean, the only place where you've got to give Florida the edge is Bobrovsky versus Woll. You have to. I mean, they're not comparable. Wall's done a good job for who he is, but at the end of the day, Bobrovsky's got a cup under his belt. So let's see what Toronto can do. They certainly don't want to lose tomorrow. And worse than going home 2-2 is the fact that they're going to have to return to Florida.
Correct.
So if they lose that game tomorrow, they go off the ice saying, we got to come back here again, and instead of being able to maybe go home and stay home.
I still look at that second line for Florida, and we saw for Game 3, Paul Maurice made the change. He moved Evan Rodriguez up to the top line from the second line, moved Carter Verhaeghe down. Verhaeghe was very visible the entire night,
yes.
Not only shooting pucks, but in a physical way as well. And I still believe it's pivotal for that second line with Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett to start producing.
Well, this is the thing that we talked about. Tkachuk has been missing in action, so he's got to be hurt because he never takes a night off. And Sam Bennett wasn't noticeable in Game 3. Normally number 9 is very noticeable for Florida. He wasn't, to me at least, in Game 3. And with Tkachuk way off his game and Bennett not noticeable, that's a big hole for them.
So the biggest contribution for Bennett was coming out of that scrum and going in on the 2-on-1 with Verhaeghe for that goal. But aside from that, production-wise, they're not there yet.
And that was very noticeable, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is very noticeable. He did get the puck over to him. Yes, that was a good play. But, I'm just going by what you normally see when you watch the Florida Panthers, and you really notice 19 all the time, and 9 is always involved in a lot of stuff. And I just didn't notice either of them other than what you just said, which was he came out of that little scrum with the puck where Marner got caught going the wrong way, and it led to a goal.
Ready for this day in Stanley Cup history?
I can't wait.
You can never wait. This is like a big thing for you.
This day in Stanley Cup history.
Here
May
we
11th.
go. Well, we tortured Bruin fans enough on Saturday with the Too Many Men on Ice from 1979, so we'll make this one a little bit happier for them. Going back to 1972, Bobby Orr's power play goal in the first period in Game 6, all the Bruins needed en route to a 3-0 win to clinch their second Stanley Cup in 3 years. Orr was the Conn Smythe Trophy winner not only that night, but in 1970 as well. But the signature of that series, and probably of that game, was Orr's goal, where he did a spin-a-rama on Bruce McGregor to score against Gilles Villemure. And in Game 2 of that series, he pulled a similar move on McGregor to set up Johnny Busick for the first goal of the game. But as you're going to school us here, many people believe that the spin-a-rama was named after longtime Blackhawk and Montreal Canadiens Stanley Cup winner Dennis Savard, and that is not true.
No, it is not true. It actually was Danny Gallivan, the English voice of the Montreal Canadiens, who called the Savardian spin-a-rama Serge Savard doing that spin at the point to get away from someone pursuing him, and the thing that Bobby Orr did so well as well. But it was Serge Savard that Danny Gallivan coined the Savardian spin-a-rama.
I just can't believe Bruce McGregor bit twice on that.
You know what's amazing about that game? Do you remember where they gave Bobby Orr the Conn Smythe Trophy?
I don't.
It was not on the ice. The fans were throwing stuff at Madison Square Garden.
Oh, they
the
wouldn't
scene
do
was
that.
ugly. The scene was ugly, and they had to give it to Bobby Orr underneath some kind of overhang. But look for the video on that, and we'll come back to you guys with it. We'll look for the video, see where it was. My memory is clear that Clarence Campbell had to do it undercover.
That's a great way to finish that story. And that will wrap up our show for today. Don't forget to subscribe, like us, and our website is NHLWraparound.com. We'll speak with you Monday with a new edition of NHL Wraparound.